And we are kicking things off with a keynote asking the question, which controls do the most for cyber insurability? So as cyber attacks grow more systemic and unpredictable, insurers are struggling to model risks that no longer fit the math. This session cuts straight to the question that matters most. Which controls genuinely move the needle? So we'll unpack the security measures insurers consistently look for, the safeguards that meaningfully reduce loss and blast radius, and the practices that make an organization not just more secure, but more insurable in a world where the unthinkable is becoming the norm. So, on that note, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our first keynote speaker of the day to kick things off nicely. Please put your hands together for Dan Bowden, Global Business CISO for Marsh McLennan.
Thank you, Lucy. I'd like to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Black Hat event organizers, sponsors, everyone. I've had a wonderful time here, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. As I was preparing my talk, I touched base with my organization, and I'll explain sort of why I have some standing to talk about this. I'll describe the organization I work for. Marsh is one of those big companies many of you haven't heard of, and I'll try to talk through explaining who we are. But we're one of the largest, if not the largest, insurance broker in the world, as well as largest cyber insurance broker in the world. So I'll talk through some research and analytics that we have done as I describe and give the background behind what I'll present today. Today we're known as Marsh McLennan, and we have these 4 operating companies that align to Marsh McLennan, and specifically to my role. Each of those 4 operating companies have a Chief Information Security Officer who reports to me. And then I work very closely not only on what you'd call in-house security, but I work very closely with our cyber advisory and brokerage businesses as well. And we're trying to solve the problem of no one having heard of us. We're going to actually rebrand in a year to just Marsh. And so you'll see these other names disappear eventually. And as part of our research intelligence center, we spend a great deal of time advising our clients on how they can be more insurable. And the punchline for being insurable is how likely are you to have a breach? And I think that it's also the same question we ask when we assess our third parties. And so I would say there's a lot of alignment in this, and we figure out how to assess this and then deliver what your organization would like in terms of understanding how can you be more insurable and how can you manage risk about insurability better. And today, we have this, I like this slide. It talks about how cyber risk comes in, and we give you ideas how to understand, measure, manage, and respond. I'll be focusing on the respond portion a little bit today as I tell you what one particular control that we've defined as a control does the most to deter a breach-related event. And so we know there's no shortage to implement of controls, and one thing that we've learned is there's a priority, and then there's also determining, is it deployed properly? And I think those of you who have been CISOs or been others who have attested for cyber insurability, you know that in the past it's always been self-attested. We ask you if you have an EDR deployed and you say yes. We don't ask if you did it well or if you did it properly or if you tuned it or how it's going. And we are starting to evolve into that idea. And I don't know if it's prevalent in the Middle East, but in the United States, car insurance companies will ask you to let them install a driving monitor device in your car to monitor your driving behavior, and then they'll help you out with better rates on your car insurance depending on how you drive. And one thing that the insurance brokers, Marsh and others are doing, we're trying to engage our clients in a similar way. If you'll let us come in and have a look at your controls, then maybe we can, it firms up the attestation. And what we've learned is there were, some very key controls. I'll spend most of my time talking about incident response planning. This presentation is normally 40 minutes, and I'll talk more in depth, but incident response planning is what we've determined to be the most important control for deterring breaches. And I'll give some distinction because incident response is a large domain and practice, and I'll try to give you some distinction in how we determine what part is planning and what specifically it means. Just to kind of set some context, we do checkpoints with clients about what controls have been deployed, and you can see in this slide, we did a checkpoint between 2023 and 2025, and for the most part, on most of the controls, the numbers didn't change. The two that changed the most that were interesting to me were managing high-rated vulnerabilities and critical-rated vulnerabilities. You can see from 2023 to 2025, there was a large increase, and maybe, and I don't know why, based on my own experience as a CISO, I thought we were all doing that pretty aggressively for a very long time, but it did ramp up a lot, and I wonder if it's because regulators now are asking more questions about it. One of our businesses was recently given a no-notice audit, and the regulator called and said, we're going to be there tomorrow, and they showed up the next day. They checked three things. They checked endpoint security, access control, and vulnerabilities. And so I'm wondering maybe if that's a driver as well that's pushing that number up. And so we've done our own assessment where we recommend to our clients where to invest, and then we're also doing studies on where our clients actually are investing. But if we had a new client and maybe they're just now getting into a mature program, these are the primary areas that we spend a lot of time recommending to them that they invest in. And you can kind of argue incident response is, SOC is a component of incident response. Logging and monitoring is a component of incident response. EDR is a component of incident response. And I'm not going to get into the weeds too much debating that with you as I talk about incident response planning, but I'll try to explain what that means in the context that we have learned and defined for our clients in helping them understand how to divert a breach. And for those of you who have been CISOs for a long time, you'll already understand this. For others that you may not understand, I'll lay some context. We always have incidents happening. So an incident is anything that deviates from normal or acceptable in the environment. And the key thing that we want to do is divert an incident from becoming a breach, meaning an unauthorized disclosure of data. And so that's when I talk about incident response planning, I'll be laying out the framework that we recommend our clients deploy in order to divert and respond quickly to an incident before it turns into an unauthorized disclosure of data. All right, so there's this, and I'll explain this slide a little bit. If you look at the y-axis over here on the left, it's signal strength, and our data scientists have started using this to describe effectiveness of controls. And I'll give a brief analogy. Many of you like watching football, and you have your favorite, in America we call it soccer, but you have your favorite team, and your goalkeeper on the team is very important. And often we try to compare goalkeepers. Well, who's the best goalkeeper? And a common statistic is goals against per game. But those who follow the game closely and follow teams closely will understand sometimes a goalkeeper benefits from the style of play of their team. Maybe the team's defensive scheme just minimizes overall shots at that goalkeeper. So goalkeeper has a better chance of a lower goals against average. What we've taken is we've said, let's pretend those shots at the goalkeeper are incidents, and a made goal is a breach, and the goalkeeper is a security control. But what we've done to try to level the playing field is we've said, let's take all these goalies, take them into an even environment, and say, if all things were equal, of those goalkeepers, who would make the most saves. And so if each goalkeeper faced 100 shots, and one of our data scientists is a hockey guy. He actually did this with NHL goalkeepers and showed us that the guy who was number 1 in goals against was like number 10 in saves based on his analytics. But that's what we've done with security controls, is said which ones make the most saves. And so that signal strength, that's what that's meant to be. And really all 4 of these bars are areas representative of incident response. On the far right, that's doing a tabletop. And as a CISO, and I don't know if you haven't had a chance to have a tabletop with the leadership in your organization, I would say it's possibly the best experience to truly understand your leadership's risk tolerance. And so I would definitely encourage you, especially if you have cyber insurance, call your broker. I would be surprised if you haven't already paid for a tabletop, that they'll come in and help you manage and orchestrate with your organization. And then going from right to left, they stack up a little bit more with capabilities. But on the far left, you see that it's basically a completely drawn-out incident response planning process, meaning top to bottom in the organization, everyone knows what their role is, everyone knows what the policy is, everyone knows who manages information, and who makes decisions about containment, eradication, recovery. All of those things are covered. And that's what I'm going to draw out today, is just the importance of figuring out why that's important. And this slide is, it's grown on me. I feel like it's a little bit noisy at first, but the top line is what I consider the most important, and it's where I would say the 3 steps below or 4 steps below are subcomponents of the top line. And so when your organization, I would ask the question, how well defined is our incident process? When an incident comes through and many of you have a presentation that you do for leadership, and I know a lot of CISOs, and I like it myself, I call it the funnel slide. And the funnel slide, the top of the funnel is one of your base kind of probably attack surface controls like firewalls, and you show how many events or incidents are screened out there, and then the funnel gets skinnier. And then you've got proof point or something, and it sifts out some more. And you get down to the bottom of the funnel after these stacks of controls. And so say it starts with 1 million at the top, and it burps down to, ejects kind of 20 at the bottom. And then you explain what happens to those 20. How are they triaged? How are they categorized? And who manages and makes decisions about if something's reported, who makes decisions about containment? Who make decisions about notifying clients if they're affected, or the business if they're affected? Who makes decisions about whether it's a material event that you have to report to a regulator? How is that vetted? And then in terms of recovery, who's in charge? And in a very large organization, and I'm in a very large organization, global support teams, multiple people who are CEOs, COOs, CIOs. It's a very complex, potentially complex operation, but we have a very well-defined plan. Everyone knows what their role is and what they do to effectively execute. And so and what I would say is, if you don't know how to do this, you have questions about it, call your broker, your cyber insurance broker, and they'll be more than happy to walk you through this. And like I said, I work for one, but I'm not saying that we're the only source. Whoever your broker is, I strongly encourage you to engage with them and get some background on how to manage that. Now, we also solicit input, and we do what's called a buyer's study. And we basically go to not just our own clients, but others, and do surveys about what is everyone paying for, what does it look like, and we're also seeing, and I think it's also being driven by regulatory needs, the incident response planning is becoming more of a global priority for all organizations. I think that we've learned we can deploy protective controls all that we want. But the fact is, with the way we try to do business, we just naturally grow the attack surface of our organization. And really, no matter how good your organization is, you're going to have some kind of incident. It's going to happen to everyone at some point. And I think if you've just checked the news over the past 3 or 4 years, some very well-known and outstanding companies have had security incidents. And so it's important to understand how this incident response planning plays out. Because if you're very good at planning, it increases the likelihood that you can disintermediate the incident in a way that you can prevent it from turning into an unauthorized disclosure of data and a reportable breach. And that's really the punchline here that I'd like to focus on. You know, when I kind of getting close to wrapping up here, it's the idea is resilience, and I think many of you have heard that term before used, and it's that reminder again of what I've said. Your organization's going to have incidents, no matter how good your controls are. The important thing to do within your organization is understand how to engage with the organization and know how you're going to respond. And then it comes down to all those steps, and you all have seen this, whether you use the MITRE ATT&CK framework, or maybe some things that do a more basic summary of detection and response, containment, eradication, recovery. All of those are important. Number 2, the controls that you have in place, you should always be auditing to assure that they're properly installed. And then after you finish that audit, come back and do it again next year. And because controls drift, and we're a huge organization, we basically have just a spinning clock, and we'll audit service accounts every year. And to go through all of the tens of thousands of service accounts, it takes about a year. And then we've corrected everything, and then guess what? We turn around and we start all over again. We do the same thing with our network segmentation controls. And we know just due to changes in the environment, assets coming and going, people coming and going, there will always be drift in your controls. So that's the point of number 2 is just because you got it deployed the first time, don't assume that you're finished. And this is one thing in the cyber insurability side, you'll find brokers and carriers are asking about a lot more. And then as I mentioned, planning remains a top priority. And kind of some just parting advice for CISOs, I would recommend if you have cyber insurance, find out who your broker is, find out what things are covered, find out how it works, develop a relationship with your broker, and then trust their advice. Listen to your broker. I was asked once about the biggest lesson I learned as a customer, and it was listen to your broker. And it happened, I had an incident in a prior job. I was certain my team did the forensics correctly, wrote the report correctly. It was done. It was uptight, but I wanted to have another IR firm come in and look at it just to check. And I won't mention the firm's name. This was 6 or 7 years ago. They were trending up. They're now well known. But when I called, and Marsh, I was actually a Marsh customer at the time, our Marsh broker said, Dan, you don't want to use them. And I argued with the Marsh broker and our outside counsel. They both told me, you don't want to use that company. And I said, but they're great and they do all these things well. And they're, yeah, but Dan, the thing you want them to do, they're terrible at. Well, I argued and I won the argument, and it took me 2 weeks to get these guys to give me a phone call back. Thank goodness it wasn't an urgent incident. We already had it closed out. But the lesson I learned is your broker sees incidents from all of their clients every day. And if they're one of the larger brokers, they see a dozen incidents from clients a day. And so they know what goes wrong, they know why it goes wrong, and they know how to help you get moving on resolving it. And so, like I said, just because I'm from Marsh, I'm not saying you have to go with Marsh, but get a broker, get in touch with your broker. They'll help you do your job in a much better way in terms of being more insurable and knowing how to respond in the event of an incident. Thank you for your time. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the day. It's been great to be here, and wish you all safe travels home.